All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Sarum by Edward Rutherfurd and Sarum by Edward Rutherfurd. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this word correctly at all. S-A-R-U-M, Sarum. It's a novel of England. It's more like a novel of Stonehenge. I mean, basically, this is a novel set in and around Stonehenge. And we'll get into exactly what the specifics of this novel entail. But before we do that, let's talk about the cover design. I've got these two copies here, and the cover is a little different on both. Like, this one's got more of a black lettering. This one has like a gold foil lettering. I always like gold foil lettering better, so we'll go with this one. But on the back sides are the same. Anyway. But here's the thing, is the spines are wildly different too. I mean, look, the type is on opposite ends. Interesting stuff going on here. I don't know why they made these changes. Anyway, we'll put one of them back here. And I'll hold one of them up. It came out in 1988. Now, if you've ever read a James Michener novel, you will appreciate what Edward Rutherfurd is doing here, because Edward Rutherfurd sets his novels up the same way James Michener sets his historical novels up, and that is you take a specific place like Mexico, Alaska, London, Poland, or the area around Stonehenge, and you just write a big 1,000-page epic novel about that subject where you kind of describe what happens in that place, whether it's Alaska or Stonehenge, in detail from the moment the earth formed and how the geography of the area formed, the prehistoric animals that might have lived there, and then all up through history as different types of people lived in these areas and what they went through. And you write about a 50-page to 100-page chapter of each of those eras in time. That's the way James Michener does his, and that's pretty much the way Edward Rutherfurd does his books. They're literally like the only two authors in the history of authors that have ever structured their novels like this. It's fine. I collect both authors. But let's talk about Sarum. There's some maps in here that the book has some nice maps. Let's see if I can find them. There's a map of England and the area of southern England that our characters and our history will take place in and around Stonehenge. There's also a genealogy chart of all of the characters that we will meet throughout the history of Stonehenge and the characters that are in all the stories. And this guy, just like James Michener, usually chooses 3 to 4 to 5 different families, and he follows their genealogy throughout the time period. This is a story of 5 or 6 families that we get to know. The Forrest family, the Wilson, the Godfreys, the Masons, the Moody's. There's a lot of different families in here that we get to know as we travel through time in each era of Stonehenge. And that's the basic setup of the novel. Now, I really loved this. I thought this was one of, but when you get all the James Micheners stacked together and all the Edward Rutherfurd stacked together, I do think Sarum is one of the best of the bunch. This, like I said, I think I might have mentioned it came out in 1988. So it was the first one that Edward Rutherfurd did. But I mean, if you want to know about Stonehenge, this will tell you everything you need to know about Stonehenge and that part of southern England throughout the whole history. So it starts in the Ice Age, the primitive hunters. And that was probably my favorite chapter, were the first 3 or 4 chapters when we're literally in Neanderthal days. And we've got a guy named Hueltep, and he carves, and he's the one that carves this stone statue. It's a representation of his wife, who he loves so much, and he carved a little stone statue of her out of stone, and he kept it and buried it and did different. I mean, it's like, and this stone sculpture shows up throughout each of these stories in some ways and kind of ties all the stories together. So anyway, but we get to see what southern England was like before Stonehenge even existed, when it was just people basically no more intelligent than Neanderthals, a cavemen, the Ice Age. This is when it was. And chapter number 2, and I really enjoy this story, these little stories that Edward Rutherfurd just kind of puts into these books, where each little story throughout each era of the Stonehenge, it's got interesting characters doing interesting things and exploring interesting parts of our history, well, at least England's history. The Barrow, the chapter number 2 is called The Barrow. It's set around 4000 BC, and it's kind of agriculture is kind of being introduced into the Stonehenge era. Before they were just kind of hunter-gatherers, nomadic people. And then in about 3000 BC is a chapter called the Henge, when they're first kind of like building the thing, thinking of building the thing, designing the thing, wondering why they would want the thing, how are they going to construct the thing. And when I say the thing, I'm talking about Stonehenge. And then the fourth chapter is set in about AD 42. No, it's like, yeah. So about 2000 BC, 3000 BC. That's when this henge was kind of being built. About 42 AD, we get another chapter. This is chapter 4. And it's called Sorvidium. Sorvidianum, I think is what it's called. And this is when the Celts and the Romans are kind of clashing over this land. Caesar is involved. Boudica, the death of and then the introduction of because it's 42 AD, sort of like the introduction of the Jesus mythology into the Stonehenge era. The fifth chapter takes place in 427 AD, so you can kind of see how we're jumping through different periods of time here, where the Saxons kind of introduce themselves to England. And then the Two Rivers is the next chapter, number 6, and that's in 877 AD. The chapter 7 is the Castle, 1139 AD. In between those eras, we get the Viking raids and things like that. Crusades. In about 1139, we get the Crusades. Legends of King Arthur start to crop up amongst the people that are living in this time period and in this area. And this area is kind of around where King Arthur would have been doing his King Arthur-y things. So we get kind of those legends and stories. We get to learn how poachers are treated when they shoot the king's deer with their bows and arrows. There's a lot of things. And then we jump to like 1244, the founding, where we get a period of peace through England. I mean, believe it or not, there were stretches of hundreds of years where kind of there was peace in these places. We think of it just as knights and the War of the Roses and William Wallace and all of these Viking raids and everything going on. It's just all death and destruction and pillaging. But there were actually like long stretches where it was kind of calm, and until the Black Death showed up. And that's one of the chapters, chapter 9. We deal with the Black Death real heavy. And just in the year 1348, I think is when it's set. It's just grim and horrifying. And it's just a detailed look at what the Black Death did to the people at those times. And then chapter 10, of course, we do get the War of the Roses and how it affected all of these areas. And then there's a couple of chapters in the middle here where we journey away from Sarum. Like some of the characters are like, hey, I'm sick of living in this small town around this henge and all the weird shit that goes on around this henge. I'm going to branch out. And some of them travel to other parts of England and Europe, and then the Tudors and the Reformation starts, and then the New World in America. And we get through the years 1642 and 1720, a lot of people are leaving Sarum and that area to go to the New World, to go to America. We get perspectives of some of the people that grew up in Sarum that go fight in the Revolutionary War on the side of Britain. It's pretty interesting stuff. And we also get the Napoleonic Wars in the 1800s. We get a whole couple of chapters about that, and of course, it all kind of what winds down to the end in our modern time, like in the. I think I can't remember what year it was, but I think 1918 Stonehenge was actually sold. It was like sold at auction for £6,000. And the guy that bought it just donated it to England. He just said, make a historical monument out of it. Here, I bought it. It's yours. And so we go into detail on that. And then in the 1945 area, we get a lot of what happened around this area during the World War II, how a lot of this area was used as a staging point for some of the invasions into France and whatnot. And so it's just a detailed history of this thing. If you saw my review of Alaska by James Michener, a similar thing just taking place in Alaska. And combined between Michener and Rutherfurd, there's about 20 novels where they just take different parts of the world and build these epic adventure tales around that specific part of the world. I think the next one I'm going to read is The Caribbean by James Michener, and then I might read The Russia by Edward Rutherfurd. Anyway, so I'm giving this a solid. I really enjoyed all the stories in this. I'm giving this a 9. I'm going to say this is a 9.6, like a 9.6 out of 10. I mean, it is quite long. I did find myself kind of being like by page 999, like, let's wind it up. I think I've heard enough about Stonehenge for one day. Even though it took me about 4 days to read through this. But anyway, that is my review of Sarum by Edward Rutherfurd, both versions.